really so grateful to you, Sister Colette, for just beginning our service by reminding us to judge not by the appearance of things. I realize, that people have been praying for peace on earth for millennia. And people have been, I grew up in a church where the ministers referred to the times we were living in. This is from the time I was born in 1951. Some of my earliest memories were ministers standing up speaking of the times we were living in as these last and evil days. And God help us, God rescue us, God protect us in these last and evil days. I can remember one time when I was about 4 or 5, turning to my mom and saying, "So these are the last and evil days?" And Mom says, "It sure does look like it, don't it?" And then I said, "Did you ever hear that before now?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I grew up hearing that." I said, "So when you were a little girl, the ministers were referring to the times you were living in as these last and evil days?" She said, "Yes, they were." I said, "How about your mom? She grew up in church. Did ministers refer to her times as these last and evil days?" And Mom said, "Oh boy, they've been saying that forever." And so in every period of time, people judging by the appearances of things seen can easily come to a conclusion that these are the last and evil days. Since my grandmother was a child, they felt like Armageddon was upon us. I can remember being in school when I was in grade school. I don't know, some of you all are my age, and some of you remember that in grade school, a big part of our schooling was learning how to, when a certain bell rang, to either go under your desk and cover your head, or to make your way down into the boiler room section of the school and to cover your head, put your head between your legs and cover it, because there was an absolute certainty that at any moment the communists were going to drop a bomb on us. I also grew up at a time where I bet you that 1 out of every 3 homes had a bomb shelter. People would dig a room into the soil with cinder blocks very thick, and people were putting like cans and jars of food in there, and it's like we are preparing for what's upon us. And when I read the Bible, going back to Bible times, it was like the same kind of feeling was in the air throughout history, her story, our story, their story, your story, my story. It's like something is about to happen. And so it's easy for anyone from any era to say, "It sure does look like it." And we are living in a time right now where, as Sister Colette reminded us in her meditation, if you look at the appearances of the world, there is so much going on. There is so much appearance of evil, appearance of pending doom. It's always been around, but every generation or every era in the generation, people think, "Oh my God, what is going on?" And the thing is that life is going on in all of its manifestations, all of its possible manifestations. This is the way it's always been, and this is the way it will always be. There will always be people acting out of particular levels of consciousness that appear to be darkness on one hand and light on the other. If we judge by the appearances of things seen, as I said before, we cannot help but feel like we are a reed shaking in the wind. And we are praying and we are doing whatever we can to try to stop this picture of impending doom, to stop this picture of war, separation, contention, and fighting, and poverty, and you name it. The appearance of things in the world shows you that you can be any character you want in the movie of your life. You can be any character you want in the story of your life. You are here living your story in history. History is just written by someone, a he, who wrote down his story of events and what those events mean. But you are here to write your story in history of what it means to be living in a field that is a field of polarity, where in order to have good, you've got to have evil, because good has no meaning unless it is set against its opposites. In the field of polarity, the only way we know what high is to compare it to low. The only way we know what health is to compare it to dis-ease or sickness. And so it's the field. It's what the field looks like. It's what it will always look like. Jesus has said there will always be the poor among you. There will always be wars and rumors of wars. And there will always be one group after another group after another group who is the current outcast society. We have had a couple of presidents that came to my mind as my brother Timothy was driving me here this morning. I remember that at one point in the history of our country, there was a president, and that president was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he was responding to an attack on our country, an attack at Pearl Harbor, where many, many lives were lost in a sneak attack, and most of our Navy was destroyed, the ships and the vessels, etc. And nothing like this had ever happened in the history of the United States. We knew that there was war already in Europe. There was an egomaniacal man walking to and fro on this planet, seeking whom he might destroy. And he was putting to death hundreds of thousands of Jews, intellectuals, homosexuals, gypsies, anybody that wasn't, in his words, the pure Aryan race, the pure white race. And so Japan had gotten involved and done a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. It was devastating because this country was not really prepared at that time to do much warring. The country was making more washing machines than it was instruments of war. And so it took the country by surprise, and people freaked out. So President Roosevelt got on the radio one night and said something that didn't make too much sense to the people listening. It made no sense, actually. What he told the people in the wake of Pearl Harbor being bombed, and now we are going to war. It's another world war. We don't know what it's going to mean. We don't know how much destruction is going to happen. And here our president gets on the radio while we are huddled around it in homes across this nation, and he has the nerve to say to us, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. There is nothing to fear but fear itself. I'm sure that after people got over some of the confusion about how can we not fear, that they began to meditate on that. They began to take it on like, well, is this a possibility? Sometimes we don't know something's possible until someone informs us that it is possible. So people are sitting around, and at that point in history, which has become different as history has moved along, at that point in history, the president's word was law, and the president's word was something you were going to meditate on. He was the leader of the free world and given mucho respect. It wasn't like these days right here. And so people began to think, well, if FDR said there is nothing to fear but fear itself, such a thing must be possible. Even in the wake of what has happened, in the wake of Pearl Harbor being bombed, us going to war, the loss of so many young lives on the Hawaiian Islands at the Pearl Harbor base, it's like even in the midst of this intense of an opportunity to go into fear, our president has told us there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And in the thinking about that, in the taking that on as an idea or a possibility, the people were able to relax some. It gave them a motivation. It gave them an opportunity to go, you know what? It's possible that we don't need to be a reed shaking in the wind. It's a change of mind. People sat down by that radio filled with fear, and some of them got up after the presidential announcement on the radio, after his time on the air. Some of those people who sat down in fear got up, standing in the presence of the absence of fear. That's where we were born to live, and that's where we were born to stand. We were born to live and to stand in the presence of the absence of fear. Fast forward, years later, there's another president. This time, we don't need to announce much on the radio because now we have televisions. We have a president who is on television. Once again, something has happened to this country. The World Trade Center towers, the Pentagon, have been plane bombed by terrorists. And our president, at this time, says something the opposite of what FDR had said after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. FDR once more said there was nothing to fear but fear itself. This current president at the time, our President Bush, says, be afraid. Be very afraid. Some of the people weren't as afraid before they were instructed by the president to be afraid. I knew some people who, after the World Trade Center towers went down, they were still going to keep their plans and go to Manhattan with the family. But boy, oh boy, once President Bush said, be afraid, be very afraid, we are on red alert, be very, 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 very afraid. Some of those people went instantly into fear. You know, the mind is a terrible thing to waste, says the United Negro College Fund. So the mind is a terrible thing to waste. And as a man who was born to speak for God, I find that when we are standing in the presence of the absence of fear, that's when there is no waste happening. But when we are standing in fear, that's a waste of our mind. I think that FDR was inviting us not to waste our mind. I think he was telling the people of this country, the mind is a terrible thing to waste. And one of the most intense and immediate ways you can waste your mind is to be convinced that you have a reason to fear. So he says the only thing to fear is fear itself. Inviting people to process that, think about it, and then to do whatever it takes to continue when your emotions pull you into fear, or the news pulls you into fear, or some information pulls you into fear, to stop and say, wait a minute, and like I said the last time I was here, choose again. Choose again who you will serve. Will you serve these principles Or will you serve your every reason to be fearful? And you know what being afraid does? It always brings along a couple of companions, at least a couple with it. When we are afraid, we are angry. We are automatically angry. Because to be full of fear is to convince ourselves that there is something to fear. There's an enemy out there who has the power to do something to me. So when I'm afraid, I'm also angry. And when I'm afraid and angry, it carries me into self-righteous indignation. I have to have somebody to throw all that on. I have to have somebody to blame. I can throw it on someone who walks into a Bible study, sits down with the brothers and sisters in that study, and then proceeds to kill them. I can project that onto someone who enters into a dancing club in Orlando, pulls out weapons, and ends up wiping them out. I can project that onto the man in uniform who overkills someone who is unarmed. I can put that on the guy who is sitting beside the road with a broken vehicle, who a uniformed man walks up to help, who is shot in the head by that man. I can project it onto whoever I want because I'm afraid and I'm angry. And my only outlet is projection, judgment, identify the enemy, and have self-righteous indignation. Self-righteous indignation is very powerful because it allows us to wish harm on people who are really our brothers and sisters. It allows us to name call. It allows us to point fingers. It allows us to see ourselves as saints and others as sinners. We are always being spoken to by one or the other of these past presidents. Their messages, their presidential directives are alive and well. They are living in the field of race consciousness. They are always around us. We are breathing in two presidents' directives always, and it is up to us to choose which one we will live our life by, which one we will be guided by. Of course, in Miracle says, my shackles have already been loosened. I need but desire it to be so in order for them to fall to the ground. It also says, the prison doors that are incarcerating me are already flung wide open. All I need to do to leave is simply to get up and leave. These are not physical doors that the Course is talking about. These are psychological doors. These are mind places. When we find our minds incarcerated, we are to remember that the doors are already wide open. All we have to do is get up and walk through to the other side. This is where the fifth principle comes in. The fifth principle says that we must walk our talk, that we must put feet on our faith. You're going to always be led by either the presidential directive to be afraid, be very, very afraid. These are the last and evil days. Don't it look like it? Or by the presidential directive that came earlier and is much more in line with this church's teaching, this spiritual center's philosophy. And that is, there is nothing to fear, but fear itself. That's all I have to say to you. I hope you meditate on it. I hope you begin to just be more conscious, more aware of where you rest in your own mind. You know, we can go all kinds of places in our mind, but where is it that you rest? When you are walking through the valley of the shadow of death, are you walking through it? Or are you pitching a tent in the middle of it and calling it home? The choice is up to us. I mean, everybody walks through the valley of the shadow of death, because that's what I just described to you. It's a shadow world. The world of appearance is the shadow of death. Are you walking through it? Or have you actually erected a little cabin? Planted your little garden there. Plan to stay there. Not because of me, but because of the last and evil days. That's why I can't move. That's why I'm immobilized. That's why I'm filled with fear, and therefore filled with anger, and therefore filled with judgment, and therefore filled with righteous indignation. I have to go far enough till I get to the righteous indignation, because that place is where I think what I'm doing is what God wants me to do. God wants me to look upon other groups of people or individuals of people as being wrong, as being lost, and as being dangerous. As a black male in the United States of America, it has been clear to me since I was a little kid that everybody other than other black little males were being programmed to be afraid of black little males, because we grew up to be big black males. And with righteous indignation, many people thought that the only safe place for the bulk of people like me would be to be incarcerated. If they are incarcerated, I can feel safe. Well, I can look at that pattern and I can go, yeah, how off base they were about that. I'm a nice guy. But then the Holy Spirit says to me, well, who do you do that with? Who are you terrorizing? Do you know that when we are not extending love to people, we are terrorizing them? When we are judging people, we are terrorizing them. When we're making them the enemy, making them the fault, shivering and shaking in fear of them, we are terrorizing them. So I always look back and go, whoa, let me check me out. Let me see what I'm doing. Let me look into my own mind and see what's operating there. For me, is there nothing to fear but fear itself? I can tell when that's going on for me. You know why? I am relaxed. I am at peace. I don't care what's going on in the news. I'm sitting there in my room at peace. I am calm and I am safe. But Lord, the moment I listen to President Bush's presidential directive, I don't care how much nice, sweet, great stuff surrounds me, how many people love me, how much I have to be grateful for. My instruction is be afraid. Be very, very afraid. I can tell when that's going on. I feel no peace. My joy is gone. My energy is drained. And I feel like the victim of the world. Greater is the power that is within us to choose what we want to think, to choose whether we're going to walk through that valley or whether we're going to pitch a tent there, to choose and choose and choose again higher, more elegant ways of being. That last song y'all did, reach out and touch somebody's hand. Let me tell you, the most fun I have in my whole life is pretending I'm going to the grocery store or pretending I'm going to the gas station, or pretending I'm going to the library, or pretending I'm going to the plumbing store, when I know inside I'm really going to reach out and touch not just somebody's hand, but somebody's heart. It's so easy. I was in Home Depot getting some bags of dirt, some clay pots. I felt the woman's energy in back of me. Somebody's not having a good day. She had 2 carts full of flowers. She looked worried about something. I knew that's the only reason why I had gone to Home Depot. It wasn't about the pots and the dirt. It was about being in front of that woman in that line. So I could whirl around and go, oh my God, look at those beautiful plants you picked out. Wow. You remind me of Lady Bird Johnson. You remember Lyndon's wife? Remember her program called The Beautification of America? We can start with our own backyard. You are right on Lady Bird's team. Wow. I'm with you, girl. The beautification of America is what it's all about. She turned from one creation into another. She couldn't tell me enough how you just switched everything in me. She was giggling like a little schoolgirl. And I went to my car with my dirt and my pots and said, where you lead me, I will follow. What you will have me do, I will do. Tell me what to say so I can say it. I left my house and drove to a neighboring town under the front of getting some dirt and some pots. But all it was to spread the beautification of America. One hand at a time, one heart at a time, one kind word at a time, one smile at a time. If you have been listening to President Bush's presidential directive and have found yourself being afraid, very afraid, I ask that you would choose again. Choose again. Choose to bring to your mind FDR. See yourself sitting with your family around the little radio and hearing his voice telling you there is nothing to fear but fear itself. And then make a decision that you will be committed to standing fast in the presence of the absence of fear.